Welcome to Hospitality. I'm Stefan Zarnecki of Black Tie Tours. With me, as always, Wesley Jones of Tour Cascadia and local artist Cole Rogers.
That's what they call me.
Yeah, it is. And we are joined today by a special guest. We are at Bells Up Winery here in the Chehalem AVA. Mm-hmm. And this person is a musician.
A former musician.
A winemaker.
That's correct.
And most importantly, an Orlando Magic fan?
It happens to the best of us sometimes.
David Specter. Well, the worst, maybe. David Specter's here.
Thank you, Spon.
Why the Magic? Why?
See, I have a tortured soul. I grew up in the Orlando area back in the 80s.
Okay, right.
For years and years, I have family in eastern Pennsylvania that used to visit, so I grew up rooting for a lot of the Philly area teams, but I never really lived there. So when the Magic came around, 1989, this is like the very first hometown team that I ever had. And a year later, we moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I haven't been to a game since.
No way.
It's a story of my life, man.
That is sad. But you were there for like Penny and Shaq. Well, not there, but you were a fan.
No, I was there for Scott Skiles, Nick Anderson. You talk Mark Akers. You talk about the dregs of the NBA that first year. That was a fascinating team.
But that'd be like started an NFL team in Portland in the middle of me being in middle school or elementary school.
But then moving away.
Yeah, but I'd still be a hardcore fan.
Exactly. And so they didn't, of course, get good until a few years after I'd moved. I mean, I think it was the first year they made the finals was 95, 6 years after the team started.
Well, Shaq was there.
Shaq was there at that point. Shaq and Penny at that time.
Ripping down.
I never realized they were such a young exhibition team at the time. Shaq was in his heyday there.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Yes.
I thought the Magic were the coolest when I was like that age. They had
were.
great swag.
Uniforms?
Shaq,
Pretty much determines which team is the coolest when you're young.
As like a 13-year-old.
For some reason, I like that team. I like the Bengals, and then you're like the worst team in the NFL.
I remember
when I was like really little, I used to draw the uniforms.
Dancing.
We're going to have to talk about your Bengal fandom.
You're still a Chargers fan.
I'm a true Chargers fan, but when I was like a little kid, I was obsessed with uniforms, and I would draw.
Absolutely.
I would make up teams, and I would draw like Jaguars versus Snakes, and I'd make their uniforms up. And I thought the Bengals uniforms were so cool because they had the stripes in their helmets.
But you were also kind of obsessed with animals fighting each other too.
Yeah, that was like
that's a whole other episode. Like, what would
my entire life
a bull mouse fighting a bull rattlesnake?
Yeah,
but the bull mouse has a machine gun.
Yeah,
or something like that. Like,
these are the questions my parents grew up me asking, rather than like philosophical, thoughtful things. Where they go to their friends and say like, "Man, my son said something really insightful today." My mom was like, "My son just asked me whether a jaguar could actually beat a tiger in a fight."
And then that show came out with like
animal.
It's
like extreme animal battle or something.
Animal fighting or something like that. Yeah,
it's like this.
Too late. Too bad I was in college when that came out.
I thought for sure it was your idea.
I mean, I still watched it.
A man ahead of your time.
But now, have you adopted any local? Have you adopted the Blazers?
I will absolutely root for the Blazers, as they are my number one Western Conference team.
There you go.
I mean, the nice thing is when you're on two completely polar opposite sides of the country, you almost never really have to worry about choosing a side.
When you root for two bad teams, also they're very rarely meet in the finals. So
pretty much. At least the Blazers at home.
Coming from a Chargers fan.
Fuck off, Wesley. I mean, we don't have to get into my fandom too much, but.
All right, so Dave, you've got an interesting story. You started in your garage with got a home winemaking kit. Did that kit come with the juice too?
Oh, it came with the juice.
So
it came with everything. And with the step-by-step, idiot-proof instructions. Not that I didn't try to screw it up, but I mean, presumably they teach you. Yep, step one, do this.
Okay, now
step two,
here's
do
a question: if you get the kit in the mail and you just leave it for a year, just sitting there, will that juice turn into wine?
No.
Okay.
No, because what they give you is it's a vacuum sealed and it's just the juice, and then the yeast is in a separate packet.
All right.
Now, I'm scared to think about in some of the cases. I mean, you look on the store shelves when you buy these things, and there are expiration dates, but you wonder how long some of those juice packets have been sitting around, and especially where we were in Cincinnati at the time. I mean, there was a winemaking community, but it certainly wasn't as robust as some others. So you're never quite sure. But that first one, at least. As I always say, that the very first one we made was a Rioja. I've made worse wines than that.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
so,
it could
you haven't
be worse.
sold worse wines.
No, that's true. That's true.
No, so you started with the kit, and then you moved on to grapes, and then you got into a winemaking club, like a co-op type thing, I think.
Yeah, we at that time. So there was a winemaking group in Cincinnati that I became a part of. Probably the funniest thing about it is I was probably the youngest person in this group by a good 25 years. I mean, we saw a lot of like old guy winemaking in this.
I like it.
And you kind of what's interesting about it is yeah, well, it runs one of the either extremes. I mean, there's almost nothing in the middle. You've either got people that have really honed their craft over 25, 30 years, and they're making some absolutely out of the world phenomenal stuff that you would never expect. But it goes the other way too, man. I mean, then you end up with like I can't smell or taste anything, and I just threw stuff in there, and well, it's good enough, so we're gonna put it in the bottle and put.
Hey, it'll get me fucked up, so cork it. Yeah,
damn. Yeah, well, and you just hope that cork is gonna stay in the bottle and not at some point blow up out of it. Yeah. You do learn after a while. It's like whose wines are you gonna trust, and whose wines you just kind of best.
All right, so you saw the good, bad, and the ugly.
Exactly.
You were. Which one of those? No, I'm just kidding. And then
depended on the batch, could be all three.
Yeah, there you go. And then so you started thinking you're doing a little tasting, going out visiting spots. You came out here, and then eventually you made your way out here with the purpose, the sole purpose of making wine.
Sole purpose of doing exactly what we do.
And you learned under Brian at Alexana, correct?
He was a wonderful. He's still a great friend. And the thing about Brian that I respect more than anything is when I was approaching him about doing a harvest internship. Here's a guy coming out in his mid to late 30s. I am not your typical harvest intern. Brian looked at what I was doing and didn't even bat an eye and said, "We'd love to have you in." At the time, Alexana was moving into the new facility that they're in now, so it was their first year. They didn't have their lab done. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't done. Brian did an amazing job of getting us all through harvest that year and getting us through. The other great thing about that experience was Lynn Penner-Ash was still doing a lot of consulting at the time during harvest. So I mean, I got to work directly with these two superstars of the valley.
Yeah.
I'm so thrilled to still be able to call them friends and folks that have really shaped what I do here.
How fortunate is that?
Wow.
And then you ended up at Adia.
Ended up at Adia. That's where we began our production.
Yeah, you started making your wine there.
Exactly. When we started out, we've always said from day one, we're a small place. That's all we want to be. At the moment, we're making 500 cases. We said the max we'd ever do is 1,000. But when we started out, we were even only doing about 250. Yeah. And we're doing all the tastings on our property here that we're sitting. But there was that point where, you're not making quite enough wine to justify the cost of going out and buying all the equipment and that.
Sure.
And it took about 5 years to sort of get to that point. And then finally last year, 2019, we said, you know what? I'm looking at those numbers penciling out. And, it was a great time we had at Adia. Working with Dean was fantastic. I still work with his daughter, Erica, as a consultant. She's amazing and really keeps us on track and make sure that, we're not screwing anything up. But it was time. It was time to kind of forge our own path and do things. And the nice thing is here, we do everything except bottling on site. So, hey, I mean, during harvest, I can do punch downs in my pajamas if I want.
Yeah, now we're talking. So so you really kind of worked your way up kind of in your own sort of path. And so I think the winemaking lifestyle is enticing.
Oh, yeah.
And we obviously have been enticed, as we've discussed, why not us?
Yeah.
Why not us make a little wine? So give me a little reality. Give me a little whether it's advice or warning or whatever, you have somebody come to you, maybe like me or maybe like a customer, and they say, "Oh man, I want to make some wine." What do you say to that?
I always say, understand why you're doing what you're doing, because making the wine is the easy part. I mean, we are blessed here to have a lot of amazing vineyards and access to a lot of amazing grapes. Yeah. Making wine, it is science, but it's not rocket science. And it can be learned. I mean, I was an attorney before I got into making wine, so I don't have any sort of chemistry training in all this. There are a few things.
Just blood sucking, yeah.
Yeah, other than the obvious. Exactly right. So, I mean, there are a few things you need to learn, but they can be learned. The hard part comes with the other parts of the business. It's the selling. It's just it's the part of running any business. if you know what you want to be, it's going to be a whole lot easier. I mean, just to give you an example, for us, we said we're a small place, so we scale everything that we do in this operation for a small place. We didn't overbuy. We don't have a big space. We didn't overspend on the equipment. Things like that, we say we're going to focus directly 100% on selling our wines direct to consumer. We're not the least bit interested in going into distribution of any kind, shops, restaurants. Conscious choice that we make in order to make the business something that works for a very small number of people.
And you see everything through that lens.
Exactly. But we've seen, and we all see it in the Valley. We've seen folks that kind of started that way, and then at some point they have to make a decision. Things grow, they become successful, and then they start doing other things and start chasing other ideas. One of the things I was so lucky when I first got into this business, I got to sit down for about 3 hours with Myron and Vicky Redford, and they were so generous with their time. And one of the biggest things that Myron told me was, he said, the thing that I most regret is I would get into these situations where when something happened in the market, I felt this need to chase it, as opposed to saying, you know what, this is what I'm good at. This is what I do. This is who we are, and just being really, really focused on that. Says he chased so many things down that he felt he wasted his time over the years. And
that
so
sounds like me.
Well,
you
said it. I did.
Yeah.
No, that's really
shiny.
That's really good advice in anything. I think probably, but especially in this industry when you could go so many different directions.
Right.
Something we briefly talked about, but you'd have a lot of experience with this is. Did you ever, when you were first starting out, have that feeling they call like imposter syndrome, where you question yourself a lot because you're around so many wonderful winemakers and amazing minds?
Certainly when we first came out here, absolutely. I mean, you go through that whole confidence period where, yes, you know how to make wine, but it's obviously you're in a whole different ballgame when you're here. I think the thing that benefited me the most was before we spent a dime getting into the industry out here, I spent 3 years working in the cellar for a little urban winery in Cincinnati. So I really learned, when you talk about from the ground up, I mean, it's from the basement up. Of course, all the things in winemaking that I do now here, but you're actually doing it, and I think so for when we came here, when people started hearing our story and hearing how we prepared ourselves, how we built that sense of that knowledge and that experience, folks went out of their way to help us and to offset and give advice. And I'll tell you too, the industry here has been phenomenal about sharing their successes, their failures, what they wish they had done, because we asked a lot of people a lot of questions, sure. And I think I can tell you that from what I've heard from some other winemakers, they're actually shocked that somebody actually listened to them for a change.
Yeah, sure.
Interesting. So we're drinking a tasty ass wine right now. Tell us about it.
So delicious.
Yeah. So this is the wine. Name of the wine is Helios, and we can get into all the naming conventions later. But this is named for a grape called Seyval Blanc, Seyval, which is a grape that good luck finding it in Oregon, with one exception. But other than us, we are the only planting in the valley of this particular grape, and it's a hybrid grape. It is a crossbreed between a traditional French grape called Seyval and a Native American grape. It was developed up at Cornell, up in Western New York. The reason that grapes like this exist is because if you're growing in the Midwest or on the East Coast, you've got something that we don't really see much of here on the West Coast, really cold freaking winters. So what you're trying to do with this breeding process is build in some of the cold hardiness that these Native American grapes have. So, of course, every time you do something like this, you're going to get a grape with a very unique flavor and aroma profile. This absolutely has that. And I would say about 80% of the grapes that you end up with are really just weird, especially for folks that are kind of more used to traditional varietals, the vinifera type of grapes. What I love about Seyval Blanc is that it retains that traditional French parentage especially on the flavor.
Right.
It's not derived from Sauvignon Blanc, but the thing I think it will remind most people of is Sauvignon Blanc, which we just don't have enough of planted here in the valley.
I know, I'm a huge Sauv Blanc fan, but when it's really pissy,
it can go bad.
I'm not interested in that.
Yep,
give me the tropical Sauv Blancs. Those are the tits.
Absolutely.
No, it's delicious. Now, you also sell, and make Syrah. So Syrah typically grown in slightly warmer. I know yours is a cool climate, Syrah.
Well, it's coming from Milton Freewater, so northeastern Oregon, right across the state line from Walla Walla.
Okay,
but I make it essentially the vineyard that I'm sourcing the fruit from is very unusual and makes it more like a cooler weather Syrah because it's up on top of a mountain as opposed to being down on the valley floor.
Gotcha. There's Syrah popping up kind of everywhere. Like there's a lot of people doing a little bit of Syrah. Everywhere you go, you talk to winemakers. The climate's warming
Right
here. You see the same things. You think Syrah is going to be the next big push, or is it kind of? Are we like 20 years out from that?
I think we're a good 20 years out. I do think that we're going to be doing some pushes for some other things. Tempranillo would be an example of something I think we're going to start to see more and more planted of. One of the fun things I think that I'm seeing happening in the industry now that I'm really excited about is folks are starting to find some other varietals to plant. We're actually going to start doing that here. We've got about 3 acres on the lower part of our field, and we're going to start planting some more obscure northern Italian red varietals.
Sweet.
Oh, good.
And just sort of go from there and start small. But what the reason that we do Syrah in the first place was I wanted to have a red that was just not Pinot in addition to what we do.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's just really, really important for just the idea of saying, okay, it's obviously Pinot country, but we have so many visitors who tell us, my God, I've had like 25 Pinots today.
Sure.
Thank God you've got something else.
Do you pour it every time? The Syrah?
I pour it every time. Yep.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I'm loving the Syrah. I've tasted the Britain one. We should do a Syrah list.
Yeah,
there's enough
Robert
now.
is an
Yeah, we
awesome,
can put it together.
awesome Syrah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we got to take a little break, but we will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Hospitality. Now is the time of the podcast where we make a little top 5 list. Really, it's like a top 15, top 14. We're cheating. We do our own top 5s. And tonight we're talking about top 5 downtown wineries. Dave, you said you worked in kind of an urban winery setting.
Yep.
In your earlier days, and are downtown wineries underappreciated? I think they are by me because my guests typically they're hiring a driver to go out to the vineyards and everything like that.
Yeah.
But there's so much good wine in downtown tasting rooms that I don't get to take people to, and it kind of kills me.
Well, there's so much value in offering folks a list when they're on their way back to Portland to catch a flight, or they have an extra day they're out with the driver. When they're paying hourly to be with the driver, they want those unique experiences.
Yeah.
But there's some killer tasting rooms.
And if you're like, when people talk about back in the day and a lot of like nice food places, they talk about hole in the wall. You don't find a lot of hole in the wall places that are sitting on beautiful vineyards. So if you're trying to find like an up and coming or a young winemaker who potentially is making this awesome something new, a downtown place is a good place to look because they're not going to be able to afford a beautiful site.
Right. Well, and some just have vineyard sites that are so far away from the main toury areas.
Yeah,
they're still making great wine. They still want to capture that downtown audience.
Methven.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and actually, as far as like up and comers, that brings me to. Wesley's going for it.
Come on.
Wesley's going
get
first.
it together.
Excuse me, I'll get to mine.
I got to crane my neck to see my list.
That's such a good one.
Abbey Creek is my favorite. They just opened a downtown Portland tasting room, but they've had one out past Hillsborough for quite a while, and I'm forgetting the name of the little town. It's past Forest Grove. Anyway.
Cornelius or something?
Yeah.
Or what's out there? I don't know what's out
Something.
there.
We'll make a note in the Stefan, that's your job.
Sure,
you get to make notes.
I'll be right on that. Abbey Creek. It's on Abbey Creek, obviously.
Abbey Creek.
Just follow Abbey Creek on the map.
Evening Land, definitely. The downtown Dundee tasting room. Alit, another downtown Dundee tasting room. Well, it's great for buyers of the entire spectrum. Whether you're trying to get something that's affordable, grow champagne for $35, or 150 Rose and Arrow.
Yeah.
Which they're all fantastic. And Paul does a great job with their tasting room.
Dynamic.
R. Stewart, McMinnville.
Cute.
Some really good little bubbles. Little bubbles. That sounds condescending. I'm sorry.
Normal size bubbles.
I think
my mouth was moving faster than I meant.
Aren't the little bubbles more desirable, though?
They are.
You want the small bubbles?
That's true.
I digress.
High fluid. But that's downtown McMinnville.
Yeah.
You're just strolling around.
Right.
Oh, I just had a little lunch. I could use a little tasty taste.
And right now, downtown McMinnville has closed down the entirety of 3rd Street for outdoor seating for restaurants. So it's
slow.
just like a big festival
awesome.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Allow those restaurants to have a little bit more seating.
Yeah.
Another McMinnville tasting room, Elizabeth Chambers, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Got a beautiful old historic building that they sort of repurposed.
The Pinot Ghetto.
Yeah.
That's over there. We got another, at least one more from the Pinot Ghetto coming
back
up.
towards the granary
the gardens
district.
are beautiful though.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Chambers.
Right.
Well, and they partner with food trucks too. So for a long time they were doing pizza like on Friday nights, and it's special little spot.
Cool.
Little.
Yeah.
I did it again.
And if you're in light of recent events, if you're trying to support local black business owners,
Right.
Or
Bertoni.
Abbey
Creek.
Yep. At Abbey Creek.
Abbey Creek is a place that we think we want to make a. He makes
It's a
really good
cool
wine,
vibe.
he's
It's
not
one of
getting
those
enough credit
vibes
for it,
too that's just inclusive to everyone.
Yeah.
Like he has a DJ that spends Friday and Saturday nights.
Yeah.
And it just feels like family. You show up and he's also the only winemaker I know that's sponsored by Carhartt. Like he has a shoe deal and a clothing
it's
deal.
his brand. Yep.
It's him.
Hell yeah.
And you walk in and there's paintings of like Biggie on the wall and his DJ's going, and
There's a vibe.
it really feels like family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Highly recommend all the
Yeah.
places Wesley talked about, but definitely that's something I want to make a point of.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up and coming winemakers I was going to mention. Will over at Violin Wines makes his wine in downtown Amity. I never get out there. Hardly ever. But it's
a hike.
Those wines are dynamite, and his lower priced wines are a steal. And Will's a great guy, super down to earth, and he looks like he's sponsored by Carhartt. Just totally cool guy. Great wines. Medfin, downtown Dundee, they have done such a great job of making that tasting room like a scene.
Yep.
Because they're doing, even during COVID right now, they've got that lawn and they're doing music like Wednesday through Sunday or something.
Yeah.
And they're doing it.
Well, and they have the
consistently.
Copitos truck right there too.
And the Copitos truck.
So you can get gorgeous Mexican food and then go eat, listen to some music.
And you get one of my favorite people in the valley, Shanna Ellis, as the tasting room manager.
Oh,
yeah.
For there.
She's
She
awesome.
is
She's
a
a hoot.
riot. Love that woman.
Yeah,
She's
you're going to have some fun. If you show her a little spunk, she'll give you a lot of spunk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And she has a story for everything. Dinner and a show.
No, it's a good spot for sure. And then let's see, Irie, down the Pinot Ghetto in McMinnville. They always pour something from the library. So if you want to see how Oregon Pinot ages, they love giving you that pour, an 86 or 93, whatever, just like, hey, check this out. And they have that huge deep cellar library program where you can buy those older bottles that they actually like test. They extract some of the wine and test it and make sure that it's still kicking, so they can guarantee like this wine's still rocking. We'll sell it to you. I mean, it ain't cheap, but shit, I mean it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's
How many other
totally
places
worth it.
though are you going to get bottles from the 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a worth a stop, definitely.
Yeah, especially if you're staying in downtown McMinnville and you're walking around, and it's a little bit more of a hike going out there, but the history there is awesome.
Yeah.
Flaneur, downtown Carlton, one of the coolest little towns in the area, probably the coolest little town. I mean, the money that they put into fixing up that grain elevator?
Yeah.
Grain elevator.
Yep.
And they've got a beautiful patio. The wines are really good. Nice Chardonnay program going there now. They have a Pinot Meunier, I think. Good wines there. Good atmosphere. It's a cool
And
spot.
Grant's just dynamite as a winemaker.
Lights out.
Yeah.
Lights out.
Awesome
Yeah.
ones.
And then another downtown Carlton place, Tendril. Different vibe. But their Tony's wines are very, very good. He's got the two different flights. He's got the Child's Play flight, kind of the cheaper wines, but still very good. And then he's got the Tendril wines. Some of them are pretty pricey, but also good. You can have a little picnic there on the lawn. It's right there by Ken Wright's winery, and they're super chill. They've got I love the warmth over there. Like you feel like welcome. Like they're just happy to have you there.
Yeah.
And
It's an important thing to have at a wedding.
please,
Nice to know.
let's keep that.
Yeah.
Can we please keep that in the valley? Don't make everything so fucking hard. Okay.
Yeah.
Just
be welcoming and kind.
Yeah.
That'll take care of half the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's just me. People are just getting tired of me.
No, I agree.
All right, cool.
I'll start off with Purple Hands. Of course, I'm a big fan of that tasting room. The building is really cool.
Yeah.
During harvest, you can often go back and have like a little tour of what they're doing. The winery is so close to the tasting room. It's a good, cool experience. Argyle, because I mean the bubbles are, you can get a flight of bubbles like nowhere else in the valley.
Yeah.
Beautiful space.
Yeah, they redid their tasting room a few years ago, and it was it's beautiful space. Dobbs also redid their tasting room. They have a really nice garden in the back. It's a good place to bring lunch. You can bring food there.
Yep.
A lit. Oh, I agree with everything Wesley said about the place. It's it's a small space, but they've done a really good job with kind of everything that's there. It looks like it's where it needs to be, where it's supposed to be.
Right.
And then Ken Wright, he took the old train station in downtown Carlton and renovated it, made it into a really cool little space. So I love Ken Wright's.
The wines are pretty good too.
Yeah,
they don't suck.
Not bad.
Yeah. Well, and now like they put out the little placemat for you.
Yeah.
And they have everything labeled of what you're drinking. They pour them all at the same time, so you can taste them side by side.
Yeah, it's an educational.
Well, in education too. If you go to their website and you want to learn anything about the history of their vineyards, Ken put together. Were you at I went with you, I think, to the Linfield lecture.
Yeah.
That Ken gave.
Yeah.
And he did all of the lineage as far back as records exist of who owned what are now his vineyards, what was planted on them, the family history, pays homage to all those families.
Wow.
And you can go to their website and pull it all up.
Yeah. Ken's a great educator in general.
Yeah.
He does not hold back on his opinions, and it's kind of refreshing too. It's really cool.
Yeah.
At this point, he's earned the privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What are you saying about us, though?
Whippersnappers.
That's true. We haven't earned it yet.
But yeah,
do you have any favorites, Dave?
There are some that I really like that I would add to that. One is kind of in the same area that Evening Land is, Lake Cadieux. Owned by a good friend of mine, Tom Mortimer. He is before we moved here from Cincinnati. Tom had brought his wines to the Cincinnati International Wine Festival. I went to meet, and I didn't know who he was, but at the time we were just trying to connect and network with any winemakers we could.
Yeah.
And Tom doesn't make the wines; he owns the place. But absolutely one of the nicest, most genuine individuals. His presentation that he has on how his vineyards are over up on Parrot Mountain. His presentation on the boulders that he had to dig out in order to get that vineyard up and running is just crazy to see in person. So yeah, they're absolutely, and their wines are fantastic. Definitely worth a visit. Another one, Fox Farm, right in downtown Dundee, is my buddy Dave Fish. Dave's a great guy.
He's there.
And he's there, and that's the thing. And he's got a really diverse selection.
Yeah.
And he has, I don't know what they do with live music anymore, but pre-COVID, he had a good amount of live performers in. And the other nice thing is they tend to be open later, so they're open till 7. I think Methven was open till 8. So if, folks were in a place and you were asking, hey, where can I hit, one last place, like either right before, right after dinner, that's another good spot.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and the Lid is open. They're right next door to them. They're open till 7 as well.
Till 7 as well. Okay.
It's a good corner to be at if you're going to end your day somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, because you got all those restaurants right in downtown Dundee, so that's a nice one. And then the other one I really also like is Artisanal, right down here in downtown Newburgh. Family owned and operated. They've been there forever, making really, really great stuff. It's interesting. I mean, Newburgh kind of downtown Newburgh has that different vibe than downtown Mac. So, it's not quite like, tasting room restaurant or so on. And, it's just not always as obvious. But, when you find those little hole in the wall places, you just get that vibe of like, you can just go in and relax and you just feel like you're at home.
Yeah.
There are for Newburgh not being as nice as 3rd Street, the downtown, there are some good wines. Like Adam Cara has good wines.
Yep.
I like the Long Play wines. AFI has solid wines. So you can spend a little afternoon down there.
Should have mentioned AFI, by the way. They're fantastic.
Chehalem.
Chehalem.
Chehalem downtown tasting
on
room.
the list.
Yeah.
Chehalem often has food carts and does music and live
Open
events
later.
also.
Well, and their food program too, even when there isn't a food truck, is their charcuterie program is top notch.
Yeah.
Well, and they're right next to the food cart pod.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you live near any of these places, don't drive to a vineyard on your Saturday and just go to your neighbor and see what they're making.
Yeah. Well, and I know for a fact Chehalem, they also will do blowout sales on stuff that they're like, hey, we're getting in the new rosé. This stuff's $15 a bottle or whatever until it's gone.
Right.
And you don't get wind of those deals unless you're there. Yep. So you gotta but pretty robust wine club and everything down.
And great people in their tasting room as well.
Yeah, except for Daniel. Fuck that guy. I love you, Daniel. Don't leave us. Don't leave us.
Now,
we love Shalem.
Dave, did you ever entertain the idea of a downtown tasting space, particularly when you were getting started, or was that always off the table?
I don't know that it was off the table. I think my wife, in some ways, would have been much happier to have not had a vineyard to worry about. I think it just, when you're in Ohio, it's sometimes easier to kind of visualize just having a retail space just to be able to sell wines through there. But then when you come out here, there's just the feel of being at a vineyard. There's so much about the experience. And, one of the things we always say is, we've got, 600 some wineries here in the valley. Darn near all of them make really, really good wine. What is going to separate you as a business? And so in addition to that, so you've got to have the experience. Well, a big part of the experience is that sense of place.
Yep.
And, when folks are here or, kind of wherever, and you've got the vineyards right here, you're physically that close to the vineyard, it just changes so much of your perspective about, what you're experiencing with the wines themselves.
Have you ever had anybody lean over the rail there and go, I'm king of the world? Because it's almost like that's the ocean and you're on the Titanic. Like, you're so close to the vineyard. It's right there.
Dang it. Now I guarantee you the next 10 people that visit here are going to try to do that.
I'm going to do it.
And just all they have to do is walk down the little stairs and they can go right in.
Right.
We'll take people down in the vineyard. I mean, that's kind of one of the fun things too, because a lot of folks that see us, this may be as physically close as they've ever been to a vineyard.
It's true. Right. Come up right to the deck.
So we'll have a lot of questions to ask, and rather than just show them pictures, sometimes we say, well, would you like to just walk right down and we'll show you exactly what's going on in real time?
Right. This is what Vrasian looks like in real life.
Exactly. See all these ugly little bugs? Yeah, sometimes they happen. You just deal with it.
I mean,
they're probably in the fermenter
where's
when
my
we're
shotgun?
making our wine.
Yeah.
There's lots
Protein.
of fruit flies too, but don't worry about it. We filter them out.
All right, that's going to do it for this segment. We will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Hospitality. Now is the time where we tell you what's been brutal and what's been beautiful here in the Willamette Valley. And what's brutal?
Brutal is all the restaurants that are going under right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
So sad.
some of our favorite chefs, and I'm new to the food scene, so for me this is a sort of a big deal as a new follower. But watching Pock Pock close the majority of their locations, Blue Star Donuts closing several of their locations.
Places you would not expect to have gone under at all.
Montage has been a staple in Portland for years underneath the bridge.
Yeah.
Just gives you perspective on how tight the margins are.
Right.
I mean food industry's tough.
You
Even
don't
places
make a
that are
ton of money
successful.
in restaurants, and there isn't like a ton of staying power when things go south, especially if you have limited indoor seating and don't have the access to pivot.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah, and here in the Valley, did you mention Valley Commissary?
Valley Commissary.
Yeah, I mean that's
one of
rough.
my favorite places for brunch and
I know.
lunch. I mean, it's just an awesome
Well, and their
place.
catering side was incredible too.
They were one of the closest things to Red Hills Market that people could go to, for fresh, delicious food that they knew was going to be an awesome cooked meal.
Yeah.
Well, they were super reliable. It's
Hopefully
really hard.
They find another spot and open back
yeah.
up.
Well, too, you think about the number of folks that work in the restaurant industry as their profession.
Yeah.
Right. I know professional servers.
Yeah.
Line cooks.
Yeah.
Like, this is what they do.
Yeah.
And with everything closing and not a whole bunch of stuff opening up again, in the foreseeable future, you run into a lot of uncertainty for a lot of our friends,
And customers too.
And
we have a lot of
customers,
customers in that situation.
No kidding.
And
Yeah.
it's just heartbreaking. And, we find ourselves a lot of times on our side of the table just trying to be that shoulder that they can lean on, and it's just somebody they can listen to.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard too because I think all of us did as much as we could with eating takeout.
Yeah.
All of our paychecks went into the pooper, but it was still like 3 nights a week we're gonna eat out where we normally wouldn't
Try
eat
and
out
eat.
just to keep some of these folks alive.
Yeah. The numbers, just like Seyval said, the margins are so tight on food as it is.
Right.
That to cut back 45% even or whatever, it's like, well, there goes any profit we were going to make. And
Well, any restaurant that serves alcohol, you're banking on folks staying and having 2 or 3 beers, having a couple cocktails, opening a bottle. Like,
Well, and now places have to close early by 10 or
10.
something. in the
I think that's
Valley?
right.
everything's closed at 10 in
Tough.
Portland.
Right.
That is
All the
tough.
bars.
And here,
right. So takeout,
They're kicking people out.
your profit margins were low to start with, and you made
Right.
up the rest of it on your alcohol sales.
Right.
Takeout at this point is basically marketing, keeping your doors open,
right?
Yeah.
Reminding people your food is still good. I mean, it's
so that's a drag.
Tough. Yeah.
But what's beautiful?
There's a flip side of that.
Yep.
So we were talking about it, and we just think that the fact that people do have to stay home and that people are being forced to learn to make recipes and go on YouTube and learn, how to make something they really enjoyed, maybe eating at a favorite restaurant that they can't go to anymore. Hopefully that has the effect on the kind of people that we all hang out with, our customers and our friends and our coworkers and whatnot, that they become more interested in what's going on in their backyard.
Right.
There's a lot of people in Portland, a lot of people in Beaverton, and even Dundee, Newburgh, who don't even realize what they have right behind them. Right. And they plan a trip to France, they plan a trip to, California, maybe Napa, and they have their thing, but they don't even realize what they have in their own backyard.
Right.
So maybe COVID is going to help point the light on this area a little bit more, and just get people more in touch with what's coming out of the ground in their own valley.
Yeah.
And what's being made.
This is the Garden of Eden in so many ways. Yeah. You go to a farmer's market or even any of the semi-permanent stands, you can get fresh beef and pork and chicken and eggs and any vegetable, for
There's a reason we have
3
freezers in our house.
Right.
You've got to have a pork person, an egg person, a chicken. You've got all that stuff covered, and it's all right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got all these people who are cooking at home and maybe realizing, man, I'm pretty good at this. So, it sucks that some of these restaurants are closing, but is this ultimately 10 years down the line, is this going to make our industry stronger? Because now we've got a new crop of people who are invigorated with, their own cooking. I mean, look at all the people making bread. You go look at all. I've got friends back east who are, you wouldn't think 6 months ago that they were obsessed with making sourdough pizza dough, or whatever, and then somebody else is doing it too, and it's like, so that's kind of cool, you never know. Like maybe they'll open up a fucking bakery because when this is all over, and it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there are positive things that come out of horrible situations.
You can cook alongside John Legend and Chrissy Teigen in your own kitchen.
Exactly.
Ohio's finest.
And who better to learn cooking from, right?
Obviously they're famous, so they must be good at cooking.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, something else that's beautiful, of course, is our guest today, David Specter, who is famous.
Oh, infamous, maybe more.
No.
Celebrity status,
or at least you've been dubbed a celebrity by a celebrity. Dave, what happened? Tell us about the Tony Kornheiser
this is what happens sometimes when you just have a moment of weakness. So those of you that are into any sort of sports journalism probably heard the name Tony Kornheiser, and if you've watched ESPN, he's done a long-running show, pardon the interruption, with his former fellow writer Michael Wilbon for 20-plus years at this point. And so what many people don't know is that Tony has also done a local radio show in D.C., in various formats over the years, and a few years ago he converted that over to doing a podcast. And for many, many years, I've been streaming, even back when I was working as an attorney, I used to stream his radio show because Tony is sort of like your old grandpa that you hear him tell stories. He's of course, he was a great writer, so he's a phenomenal storyteller and just the kind of guy that you just love to listen to. Yeah. And you just can't help but smile. So this was a few months ago, back in May. Tony's a big golfer, and Tony on the podcast was talking about going down to play golf down at Bandon Dunes. So there was a nice lady named Duska Jensen who works at Willamette Valley Vineyards who had heard this, sent him an email basically saying, hey, we apparently thought he was actually going right then, and invited him to come taste in the tasting, to taste at Willamette Valley Vineyards. And I, at that moment, just said, oh, I've been listening to this show for years. I'm not letting this one go.
You can't just jump on.
Yeah, he's not letting this one go. Yeah. So I sent an email and basically, said, hey, look, gave him my 30-second elevator speech, said, we're a mom and pop shop. We're a small little place. We're in the heart of the valley.
Well, your ear.
And, honestly, at the time, never in a million years thought that I would hear anything back at all. Well, I'm standing in the shower the next day, 7 a.m, and all of a sudden I hear him start to read this email out in its entirety. And I'm just, my jaw is on the floor, and I'm like, oh my God. Well, that was the beginning of something.
Sarah!
Yeah. Well, my lovely wife, Sarah, who does our marketing, I didn't intend this as a marketing play, but hey, I'm not stupid enough to turn down something that's in my lap, right? So I then went to her and said, well, I guess I can market a little bit too. So, but what I didn't realize was Tony has a nationwide audience, and I've known this for years. And his listeners tend to be relatively well educated, tend to at least have a little disposable income. But I had no idea how interested these folks were in wine, and how just any little connection that I could make. All of a sudden, I was getting emails and phone calls from all over the country, people who have never heard of me prior to this mention of the show. Wow. And all of a sudden, it's like, Tony mentioned you. I'd love to have your wine. And these weren't people buying like a bottle or two. This was like 6 bottles a case. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
And it's not, and this is the middle of May. So we've been 2 months into COVID shutdowns and all that. We're freaking out about, are we even going to make any wine this year? Because, sales, God only knows what's going to happen with sales. Yeah. This saved our year. I'm not going to lie. This thing saved our year. Yeah. And I've since sent him a couple cases as thank yous, and he continues to every so often he'll ding me. But I'll now get visitors. Here, I've got people that have like turned, made special trips on their vacations just to visit us for no other reason other than we got mentioned on the show.
Love it.
And this is a sports show that he does locally?
What he says is, and it's true, it's nominally a sports podcast.
So it's a Kornheiser show.
Exactly. It's mostly focused on DC. He will talk about national things, but he's based in Washington, DC, so he's going to spend a lot of time there. But it almost doesn't matter. When you're listening to the guy talk, it doesn't really matter. You just find yourself connected.
What's your take on this?
The guy talks about local traffic in and around Washington, D.C., all right?
That makes it interesting.
Exactly. It makes it interesting as somebody who has zero connection to it. And it's such a rare ability to find somebody who can just tell a story in such a way that it does not matter what your own personal connection is. Sure. You are brought in and you are enthralled. And it just makes you feel like you're welcomed into that part, and I think that's his secret.
Cool. That's how I feel about Cole's awful dating life.
Yeah. Well, nice segue, Wesley. Cole, it's story time, David.
Story time with Cole.
It's story time with Cole.
I've heard about this.
Okay, let's go. Lay it on us, Cole.
Okay.
We got about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
So this is a story about admitting when you're wrong. I was fresh out of college and driving my super nice Honda Prelude, 1989.
Hot.
Washed it all the time. It looked good. So I was in a 2-lane highway in the fast lane. Somebody comes up behind me, zooming, right? And I'm young and an asshole, so I take longer than I should to get over. But I was going over the speed limit, so he zooms by me. I get behind him. I'm tailing him. We come into 25-mile-an-hour zone. He brake checks me, obviously. I don't know how I hit him. I was at least 6 inches behind him when he hit the brakes. But I hit him. So, I haven't ever been in an accident. I'm freaking out. But I'm also a young guy, and I'm trying to be tough. So I get out of my car. This guy he's an older guy. He gets out of his car. He's driving a brand new Lexus. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, I am fucked. But I'm still going to hold my own. So he says, hey, asshole, you're going to owe me a lot of money. And I just said, you know what? You're right. I probably do. But you were being an asshole too. And he was just like, I don't really give a damn. I went back and forth. And I was not being super calm in the way I'm talking now. But I did say.
It's hard to imagine.
I said, you cut me off. I was being an asshole. I admit it. But you didn't have to cut me off. You didn't have to brake check me. We were both trying to get here fast. So he ends up leaving really pissed. I give him my information, and I just say, I'm a poor college kid. I know. I was being a dick. But please consider. So this guy calls me that night, and he just says, you know what, Cole, I thought about it. You're right. I was being an asshole. And you're right. You're being an asshole too. But I'm a dentist. It's a barely scratched up. I'm going to be able to afford to fix it. there's no need for it to go on your insurance. You know, like, I apologize for my behavior. And it was just like this awesome...
That's nice.
Restorer of humanity,
Love
you know?
it.
Yeah.
We could use some more
my faith
of that
in
these
humanity.
days.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
dentists
anyways.
and their Lexuses.
Yeah.
Shout out to this guy.
He was an awesome dude. Awesome guy, honestly.
Settle down.
So Tom,
Cooler heads.
don't know your last name, but the dentist that I
Okay.
think from Washington.
Okay.
If you're listening.
Tom, respect.
That meant a
Cheers.
lot to me, man. It really did.
I hope it was
Taught me a great
nice
lesson.
Lexus.
Yeah. So that's the story of the night.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you, David, for being our guest today. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
And if you all enjoyed today's podcast, please like, follow, share, shout from the rooftops how much you enjoyed it, and we greatly appreciate it. And that's about it for tonight. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace out.